When it comes to losing fat, stop trying to work out more and eat less. Shrinking your fat cells is what actually happens, and we're going to show you how to do that in this episode. Well, we are talking about fat loss, right? And I guess the idea everybody's always want to lose fat, look good for the beach kind of thing. But back in the day, it was about starvation and training and running and sweating.
Yeah.
Why is it different now? Let's talk about losing fat. Everybody wants to know about it. Why is it different now for us than it used to be when we were just trying to burn it all off, get ready for the beach?
Well, it all goes back to World War II.
All right, Dr. Steve, let's hear about it.
No, in the early part of the first half of the 20th century, the conversation behind body composition had more body composition and food intake was more of a hormonal conversation among the scientists. Post-World War II, it became a calories in, calories out. And you and I grew up in the calories in, calories out. It's a math equation, right? You put this much fuel in, you burn this much, adjust it properly, so your calories in and calories out are
I've had doctors
equal.
tell me that. Like doctors say, like, hey, weight loss is simple. It's calories in, calories out. What you eat and what you burn.
Yeah.
And it does it. And calories are calories, right? So that's kind of what we're trying to say. Is it's a matter of a summarization of how many calories and how many you burn will tell you how much you'll store. And
It's a math equation.
It's been our mentality since. I mean, even since
By the
we
way,
started.
this is a hot topic. This is something people are online talking about this all the time. It's kind of like nature versus nurture,
right?
Obviously, it's both,
right? Because if you do starve yourself and not eat any food, and you burn, and create a calorie deficit, you're gonna lose weight.
Right? Until you don't.
Right.
Right. So we can talk about that, but it is while it is a calories conversation, it's also a hormone conversation. And the hormones are what's going to dictate your long-term strategy. Look, if you're eating 2,000 calories a day and you're at the perfect weight, or if you're eating 2,000 calories a day, you're at the perfect weight, I don't know, you're 5'9", 170 pounds, you're at the perfect weight, but summer's coming, you got a 4-pack, maybe I want to get an 8-pack, so you go on a deficit. Right? And you go, so on a daily basis to stay at 170 pounds, and I'm just throwing numbers out there. Don't take these numbers as being realistic numbers, but let's just do the math. 2,000 calories a day, you're 170 pounds, everything stays the same. But you'd like to get down to 165 or 162. So what do? You go in a calorie deficit. You go to 1,800 calories. So you do the math. 200 calories a day less, a pound of fat is 3,500 calories, and this is how quick I'm going to lose 0.4 of a pound a week for X number of weeks, and I'm going to hit my goal.
And in a controlled environment, it'll happen.
Yes. Here's the thing. Will you reach your goal doing that? I don't know, because if 170 pounds requires 2,000 calories a day to maintain, and then you go down to 165 pounds, you didn't hit your goal of, let's just say 160 pounds, you hit 165. Now, in order to stay at 165, you need 1,800 calories a day. So are you going to continue losing weight at 8? So are you still at a deficit?
Right.
You're no longer at it. So you're eating 200 calories a day less than what it took to maintain 170 pounds. You went into deficit, you got to a new weight, and now you're no longer at a deficit. So now 1,800 calories is going to keep you at 165, but you didn't hit your goal.
Right. And if you go back to 2,000, you're going to gain the weight anyway.
So if you go back to 2,000, you're going to go back to 170.
Right.
Right. Again,
so you succeeded in basically lowering your weight, but also lowering your metabolism.
Correct.
Right.
Your body's going to adapt. I think we talked once about these hunter-gatherers who consume. So if you take an office worker that's maintaining his weight on 2,500 calories a day, and then you go to the hunter-gatherer cultures in Africa and see that they're burning 11 times more calories than you are because of energy expenditure. They're hunting and gathering and building shelters and all of that stuff. You're just sitting in your office typing on your computer. it's not like those people need 11 times more food because that's not sustainable. You can't eat 11 times more food. So they're going to become very efficient with their 2,500 calories, burning, being 11 times more active than the office worker. And the office worker is going to remain overweight and low muscle tone and metabolically unhealthy at 2,500 calories, right? So adaptation, we're biological systems, we're not machines. So the calories story, first of all, we don't store energy like our cars store gasoline. Energy in our body is stored as carbon. And it's the bonds between the carbon that store the energy, and we release those bonds, and the energy, by breaking those bonds, we release the energy to do work. So if we're talking about an engine, we can calculate very, very accurately because it's a closed system. The engine produces this much work and this much heat. And that's a math calculation. How much gas do I need to create this much work? The human body is an open system. Biological systems are an open system. So there's so many factors and variables that influence where those carbons are stored, and how we store how we store carbons and how we release energy in those carbons is determined by hormones.
So I guess what you're saying is it's not as simplistic as we've made it out to be.
Correct.
Which I guess,
if we're talking about 3 months, you could do the math and you can skew towards the calories in, calories out,
right,
for a quick weight loss experience.
It's kind of a two-dimensional look at things. It's like calories in, calories out. I get that, it makes sense, but you're saying that the guy who was at 2,500 calories and now is at 2,000 calories, basically his body adapted to the caloric intake, and the people in Africa who are burning 11,000 calories but probably only eating 3,000 to 4,000 calories have adapted their body to run more effective and efficiently.
They're not burning 11,000. They're 11 times more active burning the same amount of calories.
So they've adapted to become more efficient on, say they're eating 3,000 calories. So say they're saying eating 2,500 calories as well. So they're both surviving, they're both living, right? One's maintaining, and then one has become more efficient at the 2,500. So what makes them more efficient?
Their activity.
It's the but the hormonal response to the activity.
Yeah, of course.
What I'm saying is there's a physiological response in the body that makes them more efficient at far less calories. If they're burning 11,000 calories.
Not 11,000, 11 times.
11 times, right.
They're 11 times more active. Doesn't mean they're 11 times more burning.
So the human body in the first case adapted to the slightly lower calories, maintained the body tissue, right? Now we're talking about something 11 times more, but not much more as far as
food intake, because again, that means our ancestors would have required 15,000 calories a day, and that's
so there's systems in our body, right, that are much more than calories in, calorie out.
Right. But by the way, the interesting experiment to do is to go. Nobody would do this because it's cruel. Go find that 2,500 calorie a day hunter-gatherer, 11 times more active than the average American. Bring them, fly them over here, and have them mimic what you do. Sit at a computer and give him the same calories. Over time, he's going to become obese, right? Because he's so efficient.
Beyond obese, I'm thinking the mentality of the poor guy or girl. It's like, and that happened to me, right? I was a chiropractor forever, chronic pain. I ended up in an office for 2 years.
Right.
I might as well. I want to jump off a bridge. I mean, just stay in a cubicle on a phone and do sales stuff and gain weight and not be doing what I naturally would do physically as a chiropractor, moving. And for me, it was more than the physical. It affected me. The psycho-emotional element of that was tough, because you were just used to moving and talking, but then to be stationary and then go down to the cafeteria and get your coffee and your cookie and your lunch and your snack and your soup, and it was like this thing. And for a little while there, that for me,
think about what constitutes survival these days.
Yeah. Well, that was for me. What was good about that was to be able to identify with people who are in a cubicle, who do go to a business workspace. It was an interesting experience and experiment for me for 2 years.
Right.
It absolutely it motivated me to get out of there and do what I'm doing right now. but at the same time to be able to identify with sitting in a chair and not having the movement and feeling heavier. And I just felt my blood pressure rising every day.
Yeah, I think most people listening to this agree with that, right? As much as you don't like going to the gym, there's not a person who goes to the gym that doesn't feel great after they walk out.
Right.
So, what does feeling great mean? Well, it means you're functioning better, right? Mentally, psychologically, and physically. So going back to the calories in, calories out versus hormones. So in the short term, the calories story can be quite effective. And I say the short term because, again, we've all watched the show The Biggest Loser, and we see how quickly in 6 months of a season or whatever, people go from morbidly obese to lean and mean.
And I would expect most people watching this podcast have had that experience where they've tried to lose weight and they
gain it all
calorie
back.
restricted and they've been through this process. They know that they can do it, right? They know it's doable, and sometimes even the temporary is better than nothing for them. So it's like, I'm going to lose the weight for the summer, and they don't realize what they're impacting in their metabolism, what's going on. So let's bust some of those myths. Like, why does that not work? And what should we be kind of looking more towards doing?
Why does not?
The calories in, calories out, restricting doesn't. We know that's not working, right? So that's the old way.
Okay, so let's just continue with the story of this person who went from 2,000 calories to 1,800, got to 165, halfway to his goal. He wants to get to his goal, so he will go down another couple hundred calories and meet the goal. But then they're like, well, I'm 160 pounds. I got my 8-pack. It's July. Going to the beach. I feel good. All right. Well, I'm restricting. I'm preventing myself from eating the way that I want to. I don't have to go back to 2,000 calories a day. Why don't I just go from, again, let's just say they went down to 1,400 calories a day. I'm just going to go back to my deficit, 1,800 calories. I'm going to just increase. No, because your set point of 160 pounds requires now 1,400 calories. Go back up to 1,800, do the math. You're going to gain weight steadily, eating less than when you started. And that's the frustration, right? And that's because we're not taking into account what the long-term strategy is and as it relates to appetite and what dictates appetite, what hormones, and what happens hormonally in our body is really what's going to dictate the long-term story. So there's always instead of calories in, calories out, again, we don't store these carbons like our automobile stores gasoline. We have different things that we can do with it. So we would like to be theoretically less efficient, meaning where we used physical fitness and exercise to have more engines to burn energy in our muscles. And we've talked about that, where zone 2 exercise helps increase mitochondria, which are the engines of energy burning. And so if you can do things that increase your mitochondrial activity and your mitochondrial number, well, then you're just going to burn more energy existing, right? Because now it's going to get complicated. The energy burn is going to come from what your perceived needs are. So if your body still thinks it's lacking, it's going to want to hold on to stored carbons, stored energy. And if we store more than we burn, again, not from a calories standpoint, but from a carbon standpoint, the food we eat, then we're driving things towards storage. That means there's less in our blood to use for energy. If there's less in your blood to use for energy and you're storing it away, your brain is going to say, eat more, right? Because we have to look, it's not like anyone's running around measuring their calories, right? They're responding to their body signals. Am I hungry or not?
Right.
So when you lose weight, there's something called NEAT, N-E-A-T, right? So it's non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So what that means is, you've seen people sit at their desk and their leg is popping up and down. There's more fidgeting going on. Well, it's estimated that you can fidget 200-300 calories a day if you're a fidgeter. But if you're not a fidgeter, you're not going to burn those extra calories. And 200 calories a day is significant.
Right.
So non-exercise activity thermogenesis, if your NEAT was high, but then you went on a diet and you restricted, then your body turns off your NEAT. It turns off those calories that you burn just, being fidgety and shifting in your seat and shaking your leg and tapping your fingers unknowingly, right?
Really? So
yeah.
there's an automatic reaction because you're caloric deficit?
Yeah, because you're going to preserve.
So do you not fidget, or you just don't burn the calories when you're fidgeting?
You shut it down.
You just stop fidgeting.
You just
the
stop
energy
fidgeting.
to do
It's not a conscious
It's
thing.
more of a subconscious less
right.
energy type of thing.
Right,
your body's
because you told your
down.
body, I'm getting less calories, and therefore the body wants to defend itself. Remember, less calories means you're having a hard time finding food genetically, according to our history. So the body is just adapting, right?
Okay, so obviously calorie restriction is not going to work, because once you start eating, your body is going to, if you don't change your activity level, you're just going to slow your metabolism down.
Yes, but let's get more now to the hormonal story, because what you eat matters. Let's just say you're happy with the 170 pounds. You don't want to get down to 160. You're eating 2,000 calories a day. And then what you eat changes. I don't know, you meet a spouse, or you come from a more carnivorous lifestyle, and then you meet someone and you're spending more time together, and you're eating, they're Italian and they're eating more pasta and bread, and you've never had a problem with your weight. You don't really care. All right, yeah, I'll have pasta. Yeah, let's go to the Italian restaurant. And you just shift your macronutrients to be more carbohydrate dense. All right, so managing more carbohydrates is probably going to require more insulin. Insulin is a storage hormone, right? It's a hormone that's going to store carbons. It's going to store energy. So what you do is the insulin does a couple of things. Imagine a fat cell has an entry door and an exit door. The entry door is going to allow energy to come into the fat cell to be stored. The exit door, if opened, is going to release that energy into the bloodstream to be used for energy. Insulin increases, it opens the door, the garage door that lets energy in, but it closes the door that lets energy out. So if you just stay with the same calorie story and change the hormonal story by increasing your insulin, again, not to pathological, we're not talking about diabetes here. Right. Diabetes skews everything. It creates all kinds of problems.
Let's insulin being the hormone.
People.
We're not talking about testosterone. Hormone. We're talking about insulin as a hormone for people that are listening.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about a hormonal change, right? Mm-hmm. And insulin is a hormone that grabs sugar, puts it into cells. But we know you just explained it as the door opener and the door closer.
Yeah.
So insulin is a hormone. Okay.
It's a hormone.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
So and it wasn't being as much utilized in this particular scenario before they met the Italian, partner.
Yeah, maybe there was a better. Maybe the garage door was on the input side was open halfway.
So by shifting the where the calories are coming from, maybe let's keep it around keeping the same calories.
Yeah, isocaloric. Yeah.
Okay. So what's going on?
So by releasing more insulin throughout the day than you were before, you're just more likely to store more than burn, and you'll skew that towards storage. Insulin is anabolic. So if we say there's two states that you can be in, catabolic and anabolic. And we are catabolic and anabolic all day long, right? Catabolic means you're breaking things down to use for energy. Anabolic means you're taking energy and storing it.
For another time. So because all of a sudden the body's seeing the insulin is spiking because there's more of a plant-based carbohydrate in the system, which would be more, evolutionary back in the day, back when there was maybe the warm weather, and it's hormonally going to want to store those calories for at a time when there is a deficit.
And the fact is, too much sugar in your bloodstream is dangerous. Right. So we've talked about how at any given point, 90 minutes after your last meal, in your 5 liters of blood, you should have about a teaspoon of sugar in your blood. If you have a half a teaspoon, you're probably unconscious. If you have a teaspoon and a half, you're probably diabetic. All right, so if more of your calories are coming from carbohydrates, again, not calling carbohydrates evil, but it just requires a hormonal response that's going to prevent you from having too much sugar in your blood, because sugar is toxic.
And it's going to put it where?
And it's going to put it into fat cells.
And our topic today
is muscle cells.
Well, okay, but
muscle cells.
So we're trying to burn fat. So by just changing our source of calories, we're having a completely different reaction in the body.
A different hormonal response, correct.
So the calorie in, calorie out argument now becomes debunked.
Yes.
Because it's not as two-dimensional as we once thought.
Correct. Right. Because it's not a closed system.
Right.
It's an open system, open to the environment and the changes and the environment is your food environment, your blood environment, your atmosphere, your temperature environment, right? That NEAT activity, that non-exercise activity thermogenesis, when you're cold and you're shivering, well, that's great. That's burning energy, right? So there's too many variables affecting all of these things, and we're just on the hormone side, we just brought up insulin. We didn't bring up anything else. We didn't bring up leptin, right? Leptin was discovered in 1994. That, for us, is yesterday, right? So leptin is a hormone that is released by your fat cells, telling your brain, stop eating. Fat cells are good. A lot of the energy that you just took in from your food, you're not currently active. I've stored it, but enough, because fat cells don't need to get too big. So there are people and animals that we can study who we can knock out their ability to make leptin. And if you can't make leptin, you can't stop eating. And that is a very rare disease. But when we do it to mice, you give them food, they'll eat their own feces. They can't stop eating, right? Because nothing is telling them to stop. So that part of the brain, it's called the hypothalamus, is just activated and nonstop telling you to eat, and you become obese.
So we're talking about fat, right? But the time that this particular person we're talking about shifted to carbohydrates, it opened up the gateway to store in the fat cells, right? So so now this person's diet.
We're not talking about dietary fat. Correct. You're 100% right. The extra carbohydrate
are getting stored into their own fat. We're trying to burn fat, but that in particular, we're creating
more fat.
Right. So that being said, before we move on, is there also an element where you're eating fat that the same thing happens?
Yes.
Because people are afraid of fat, right? So here you're eating a low-fat diet.
But with fat, you don't have the insulin response. So insulin is the hormone that's really shifting the balance here from storage to not storage. Yes, if you eat a lot of fat, you still have to store
I guess my question is there a hormone when you eat fat to store fat like there is when you eat carbohydrates, where insulin is putting sugar into fat?
Yes, and it's insulin, but it's not an increased amount of insulin. See, fat doesn't raise insulin, right? If you didn't eat at all, you're still making insulin. If you couldn't make insulin, you're type 1 diabetic and you're going to die.
Right.
So there's always a baseline of insulin, right? So that's going to kind of manage flow. We're talking about increases relative to that baseline. So the leptin story, so let's just say now, like any other hormone, too much of it, you're going to become resistant to it. So leptin tells you stop eating because the fat cells are full. Because fat cells, usually from most people, 95% of the population, when they gain weight, they're not gaining a number of fat cells. They have the same number of fat cells they always had as an adult. They're just getting bigger. But, think about it. How far away the components of a cell are from their blood supply matters. So if the fat cell keeps getting bigger and bigger, it's going to need more blood supply, it's going to become very difficult to detoxify that cell. So fat cells can't get too big. That becomes a pathology called obesity. So if you keep releasing the leptin, trying to tell you to stop eating, the brain becomes resistant to leptin. So just like you can have insulin resistance, you can have leptin resistance. So now watch this. So the leptin tells you to stop eating, to drop the insulin, to open the garage door, the exit door from the fat cell, to release fat into the bloodstream to use for energy. Remember, when there's energy in the blood, the brain doesn't need to be hungry. So now you have high insulin, energy's coming in, you have leptin resistance, so the garage door, the exit door is not opening, so you keep stuffing more and more in, it's getting bigger and bigger. The fat cell starts releasing inflammatory cytokines in order to bring more blood supply, right? So the fat cell doesn't become toxic. And it's a vicious cycle, because then you become, now the body's protective mechanism is, all right, the exit door is closed, the entry door is open, I now need to become insulin resistant to close the entry door to prevent the cell, right? So it becomes, and now the sugar is building up in the
bloodstream.
Right.
So you got the insulin now becoming resistant, not opening the door as much, not allowing the sugar in, and now you've got fat cells that are bloated, giving off cytokines. Mm-hmm. You've got sugar in your blood beyond the teaspoon, right? So now you've got issues with that, and it becomes this vicious cycle, all because of the hormone insulin sparked by the increase of carbohydrates or in the diet beyond what they were eating before.
Yes. And again, we have to remember, we're talking about energy going into the fat cell. Energy, also sugar, goes into the muscle cell, right? And we can store glycogen, and that's good. But as we get older and less active and our muscle volume decreases, that same diet that worked for you when you were 28 doesn't work for you at 58, right? Because your muscles are smaller and weaker.
Do they also become resistant to the insulin as well?
Oh, yeah.
So all the tissues are. So now as time goes on, so would we say it's the amount of insulin or the frequency of insulin or the combination of the two in the day?
So if we're talking about genetics matters here. If you have someone, let's just take a 5'7", 120-pound female. One has always been 5'7", 120 pounds, never had an issue with weight. There's no one in their direct lineage suffering from obesity. You take another woman, 5'7", 120 pounds, whose mother or father was obese or a sibling or whatever, but they had lost 20 pounds, right? You give them the exact same number of calories, right? You give them the same exact number of calories and a mixed macronutrient profile at 30, 30, 40. The one with the history of obesity is going to be going to store more. They're just going to store more. Their insulin response is going to shift that equation towards storage rather than burning because of their history and all of that. So for that person, the macronutrient profile probably should be lower carbohydrate than the other person. This is where the hormone story is much more valuable. So if you have a history of being overweight or obese or whatever, and you're at your target weight and everything is good, but again, there's a genetic lineage and a personal history, you should probably still skew towards lower carbohydrates, lower insulin, because you're much more likely to be somebody who stores more. Now, if you're more likely to be somebody who stores more, over time, this is why 99% of people who lose weight gain all their weight back. If you're skewed towards storage, that means you're skewed towards less energy in your blood. If there's less energy in your blood and you're skewed towards storage, the garage door exiting the fat cell is still on the closed side, your appetite's going to go up. Your brain's going to tell you to eat more.
Sure.
How long can you resist that?
Right.
I mean, when you go online and you get on Twitter and all these places where these arguments occur, you get a bunch of 26-year-olds who are bulletproof and invincible and working out all the time, and they don't have a job, and they know it all, and they're saying it's calories in, calories out. Go to the gym, work out, control yourself, stop eating so much. Like, that story works for people who are 26 years old and bulletproof. It doesn't work for people who are metabolically unhealthy.
Right.
So it doesn't help them at all. What helps them is kind of understanding this story. So if we were to make it simple, what do? Well, the less insulin you're producing, the better, right? The more active you are, the better. The more muscle volume you have, the bigger the sink you have to put your carbohydrates into, the less you'll store as fat, the more you'll store as glycogen. Those are all good strategies. Those are all things that'll give you some long-term success.
Well, would you say the name of the game should be becoming more efficient at fat metabolism, or the name of the game should be more
hormone
somehow
sensitive?
the flexibility between both energy systems? Like, if I could easily take this conversation and say, if I want to be extreme and get ripped, right, and be healthy, I don't need another carbohydrate again.
Right.
That's what all human beings should do. That would be a statement that maybe some PhD, scientists might say who don't work with patients every day like we do. But you can take that. I mean, I would be like, well, then why would I ever have another carbohydrate again? Or does it make sense for me? Is it better to be more, I guess you call it metabolically flexible?
That's the term.
To be able to use both? Or should I just really kind of focus on staying away from my insulin spikes, keeping it very low carbohydrate? Carbs are going to get in one way or the other, making sure they're coupled with fats to load the spike. So, how should I be approaching this? How would I, right now, that's exactly how I'm approaching this.
You're a 54-year-old man, so you're very different than you were when you were 24 years old. So the older you get, the more insulin resistant you are, right? So I think the older we get, the more we need protein and fat. The less insulin spikes we have, the better.
So here's another question. So would it have been better? So that's what I do right now, right? So honestly, hanging out with you for the last few months, and I knew from the very beginning that this was going to happen, and it did. I was going to be staying away from carbohydrates and sugar. And I avoided that. I avoided many of our conversations that I knew would lead to that at the beginning because I wasn't ready, right? So for the last 3 weeks, my insulin spikes have been minimal. So my question is this. Is it because I'm 54 years old that I'm getting such a great result because my body may have been back and forth, a lot more insulin going on, and it's just not there anymore? Or would it have been better? Like what I'm saying is like that woman who never had the history, she was able to move on, but the one that had the history actually lowered their calories. Yeah. So I have a history of being all over the place, here, there, tried it all, and now I'm on this much more carnivore, keto type diet, keeping my insulin spikes low. Am I getting great benefits because I didn't do this the whole time? Or is it better to take that 20-year-old person who can eat anything, work out anyway, say they're ripped, would they be better off eating this way? Or they're just seeing they're not getting the same negative impact because they're young and they're able to do it. Would they be more, say I took a 20-year-old athlete, right, and I want to make them more efficient. Would I be tapping into how I'm eating now, or would I be doing something different?
My son, same age as your son, 20 years old, 21 years old, 6'5" beast, right? He could eat like
it would be a great show to have our sons on the show with us. They're monsters. Yeah.
My son pretty much is kind of like a carnivore fruitarian, right? So if he was like us when we were their age, there wouldn't be much of a difference, I don't think. I mean, George is fit, he's muscular. I believe that his diet certainly contributes to that. But the younger you are, the more of a hormonal response you have, and the more your body responds to activity. It's very sensitive to those things. So for example, on a daily basis, for me to hold on to the muscle that I'm losing because of my age, I need to work out a certain amount and I need to eat so much protein. Well, when I was 21 years old, the amount of protein I had to eat and the quality of the protein was less meaningful, and the amount of activity I had to do was less meaningful. Now it's more meaningful just because of age and time. So yeah, humans are humans still, and I think because there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate, right? There's no such thing as that. So if you remove, I don't see the problem with having a low or no carbohydrate diet. I just, as long as your protein and your fat is appropriate, I just don't see a problem with it. I don't know what the health concerns are that people have if they don't get enough.
Right, I guess you'd have to think through clinically what are some of the things that would happen to someone who wasn't eating carbohydrates, and I can't think of anything.
Well, your body is going to adapt from an energy standpoint, so it does take a little bit of time. But if you take someone and you used a great term before, metabolically flexible, if you teach them to become fat and protein adapted, so that they have energy in their muscles can grow, they have glycogen, this belief that you have to eat a potato to store glycogen in your muscles. Yes, of course, there's a mechanism for that, but there's also a mechanism in the absence of that to put glycogen into you. Matter of fact, if you take fat-adapted athletes and measure the glycogen in their muscle, it's equal to that of somebody who's consuming 30-40% carbohydrate in their diet. Now, if you take that person who's eating 30-40% carbohydrate, measure their glycogen, and then do just 3 months on a low carbohydrate diet, of course, their glycogen is going to be depleted or less in their muscle because it's just been 3 months. Give them some time.
That's my next question. That's my next question. So 2 things there, and I think we're trying to piece this together, but our body can adapt. Eating protein and fat could utilize those carbon chains in the protein and the fat to make the glycogen, to make the sugars that the body needs. And then if you have a carbohydrate diet, it's almost like they deal with that initial blast of carbohydrates first just to get the same thing done.
Correct.
So interesting. So let's stay along this conversation about fat adaptation, because I'm, like I said, 3 weeks into this and I feel very clear. Brain fog's gone. I feel amazing. So how long does it take to get fat adapted? Because I think I'm getting benefits now. And people will pull out carbs for a week, pull out carbs for 2 weeks, and I can see how that could be a struggle.
Yeah.
Because if they go back to the regular diet, but maybe the struggle is because they're still in that initial phase. So explain fat adaptation, what the benefit would be and what that looks like and how long it takes to get there.
It depends on the person. So it depends on your genetics. It depends on your age. It depends on your hormones. It depends on your state of metabolic health prior to making that change. So you were very metabolically healthy prior to making that change, and you made a change and you remained metabolically healthy. So for you, 3 weeks is you're experiencing things that might take somebody who's metabolically unhealthy 3 months, 6 months to experience. If you have somebody who's a pre-diabetic or diabetic, overweight, maybe even obese person, and bring them through that same process. By the way, it does happen fast. 6 months is a long time. A lot of great things happen in 12 weeks, in 3 months. But to have long-term adaptive responses that you could now say, I have a new set point, I think that takes a year.
Changing the insulin
and I'm
resistance.
basing that on my experience. I'm basing that on my patients. I'm basing that on, you and I have patients and, that become clients, right? The difference between a patient and a client is a patient has a problem to solve. A client is somebody who's just growing, and it's like being a coach. And I love when my patients become clients. And you and I have a very high record for converting patients into clients. But the client story is the long-term story, right? Those are the people who are looking for longevity. Those are the people who are looking to establish the set point and keep it.
Right.
And not just get into the the bathing suit, that one trip to Europe, and take your shirt off and take pictures and post them, and then you gain all that weight back.
It becomes a lifestyle of, I call it a lifestyle of results. You know, the results of the motivation at that point. And to go like, yesterday was, you know, as we record this, yesterday was Halloween. And I mean, sugar and that stuff could pass by me, and it's, to me, it's poison.
Yeah.
Because it's going to spike my insulin, right? So it's kind of been the conversation.
It's poison on a lot of levels. Yeah. Spiking insulin is just one.
Right. And so another thing is by eating. So let's talk about that, the quality of the fats. We're talking about fat here, and I don't want anybody thinking if you go to the deep fryer or seed oils, or where you source your fat from makes a big difference as well. So let's hit on that.
But where you source your protein from, that too. So where are you sourcing your food from is really what we're talking about. So just to button up, you know, for the listener, you want your existing fat cells to shrink, right? The best way to do that is to open the garage door to allow energy out, and to, you know, maybe.
Could they shrink too much? I mean, we all have a lot of loose fat, but like, I'm at a point right now where, I mean, I'm really pretty lean. Like, does it get to a point where there's not enough fat?
What do you think your body fat percentage is?
I haven't taken it, but I would definitely say under 10%.
Okay, so do you think you're under 6%? I'm going to tell you definitely not.
I'm not, but you know what? With some effort, I could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's no desire to,
right.
But I mean, like, I'm like, my point is, when you get to a certain place, it's like, should you be concerned that you're losing too much fat?
Under the impression that what you've been doing for the last 3 weeks is just going to be a straight continued trajectory down. You're going to adapt. Your body's going to protect you. It's not going to allow you to get to a dangerous. It's not like you're starving yourself. You're eating food. You're still consuming. Let's just use the math again. If 3 weeks ago you were getting 2,000 calories a day, 30, 40, you know, carbohydrate, protein, and fat, or whatever, and now you've skewed it 40, 40, 20, or 45, 45, 10, with the carbohydrate being the lowest, you're still isocaloric. It's not like you're disappearing.
Right. As a matter of fact, I've increased.
Don't think your body fat's just going to continue to plummet.
I'm eating fat. I mean, just so you know, and I used to intermittent fast.
You can't go low carb without going high fat.
You can't, because I was what I ended up doing after our conversation about ghee butter, and I don't think this was on a podcast, but we just talk about things all the time. So ghee butter. So I was intermitting. I was fasting. I wasn't putting calories until 1, but since I pulled the carbs out, I put the butter and the coconut oil in my coffee in the morning. So I'm actually getting calories now.
Yeah.
But I'm still losing and burning. It's like the more fat I put in.
You're early in the process.
Right.
There's going to be a leveling off.
Well, my point is I'm putting more fat in my diet, and I'm seeing the results even more.
You're still burning fat.
In the past, I was restrict still and just only eat now, but I've actually introduced fat into my morning, which gives me incredible mental clarity, right?
Yeah.
I feel zero as far as gaining any bloat or weight. So it's been a nice addition.
Yeah.
Because black coffee's not so much fun, by the way. It's nice to have a little, you know.
For me, I'm a much higher body fat percentage than you, and I don't need to put coconut oil in my coffee. As a matter of fact, I avoid drinking food, drinking calories. I drink water, I drink seltzer, I drink Pellegrino, I drink black coffee, I drink tea, but I don't drink fat, and I don't drink protein. Not that protein supplements are bad for you. I just, as a rule of thumb, my calories come from food, and my liquids are usually without calories.
Right.
So when we're talking about this equation, if we want our fat cells to shrink, when insulin is lowest, the garage door going out is open, the garage door going in is more closed, and the more activity you do, in the zone 1, zone 2, low intensity range, whether that be walking your dog, doing housework, going for a ruck, doing some
Right,
steady
fidget up the
bike
zone too.
ride, fidget, right? Or having a stand-up desk with a walking pad, while you're working on your laptop. The more you do that in the fasted state, the more fat you're going to burn to do those things, right? So again, fat cells are going to shrink because you're using fat. You're releasing fat into your bloodstream as an energy source, and that energy source is abundant in your blood, so your brain doesn't feel like it needs to eat. So your appetite goes down. You've noticed that. Your appetite has dropped.
Does your blood spike anything when there's fat in the blood? Is there anything going on there? Like, say I'm eating fats, just like I would eat instead of a carbohydrate, so I'm not getting the insulin spike. Fat shows in my blood. Is the body reacting and say, what am I doing with these fat cells? Do I need to do something with them?
So in your gut, when you eat, when you swallow the coconut oil or the ghee or whatever, you're going to package that up into what are called chylomicrons and VLDL, very low density lipoproteins. And this is how your body is going to take fat, deliver it to the tissues that are going to use it for energy, right? So your muscles are going to grab that. Your muscles are going to grab So there's a hormone. Again, we only talked about 2 hormones so far. There's something called lipoprotein lipase. Lipoprotein lipase is a hormone that takes fat in the blood. So think of fat in the blood is in the form of a triglyceride, right? So there's 3 fatty acids that are hanging off of it. Lipoprotein lipase is going to break that down and shuttle it into either the fat cell or the muscle cell. If it shuttles it into the muscle cell, it uses it for energy. If it shuttles it into the fat cell, it's to reassemble it into triglycerides and store it as fat. So when you...
Is that a hormonal response? This is a hormone response?
Lipoprotein lipase is a enzyme.
So I'm saying it's a subtler breakdown and seems to be more of a natural process, where insulin seems to be this alarm system to get that stuff out of the blood.
It's a master hormone as opposed to lipoprotein lipase.
Yeah.
It's just reacting to...
I'm trying to correlate, I guess what I'm always trying to think is what's the most efficient way? What is the body really wanting to more efficiently to work with? Is it the protein in the fat or the sugar? And it just seems like every time a carb comes into the system, it has to be this alarming thing to deal with that first, because otherwise it could wreak havoc on the system, where fat seems to be more of a benign type of process. Does that make sense?
So fat comes with protein, right? And usually in its animal source. Carbohydrates come from plants. And, if we think about what fruits and vegetables looked like when we were developing as humans over millennia, they were bitter. They weren't these giant, beautiful, sugary apples. They were like little bitter crab apples. Carrots were these incredibly skinny, bitter, the kind of thing that, I'm starving. It's wintertime. I'm in New Hampshire. It's 10,000 BC. I need something to eat. And there's nothing but snow on the ground. But if I dig down, I can pull up this root and get some calories, right? I think that's where carbohydrates, its ready use of energy was more for what you would have to do in between kills.
Right. Bridge some sugar energy.
Yeah, and that's a theory that I ascribe to. Now, if I was a hunter-gatherer in the tropics where avocados and bananas are growing all year round, well, then there's plenty to go for. But if you're in the plains of North America, you're going to take down a buffalo. You're not going to sit there and cultivate corn because you don't know how.
Right.
Right. But in between buffalo kills or whatever, there's some stuff you can yank out of the ground and chew on for some caloric benefit. So I believe in that we adapted as humans to that, to be more favorable in that environment. Mind you, I'm now 55 years old. Hunter-gatherers didn't have that luxury of living to a ripe old age. Physiology is physiology, I get it, but we are adapted to getting to an age where we can make babies. We're not adapted to get to an age where we can be 100 years old. So there are things that we have to learn about aging and physiology that puts this, like if you're 75, 80 years old, you can't live as a hunter-gatherer, right? What happened to 75-year-old hunter-gatherers? They kind of told the tribe, go without me. I'm gonna hold you guys back. I'm gonna sit this one out. Just go.
Bring me back a leg.
Yeah. And that person's gonna hang out alone, and a human alone in the wilderness is gonna die. So that's what some animal is gonna come and take them out. They weren't necessarily dying of communicable disease or the flu or heart attacks or cancer. They were dying of frailty. They just are unable to hunt and gather and be with the tribe and contribute, and then they just kind of
right. So what's cool is we kind of debunked the calorie in, calorie out today, but we still talked about food intake and how it's processed. But beyond the food itself, how much does the autonomic nervous system stress play a role with fat metabolism? I know cortisol is in there as with the insulin cortisol game. Like, how does that impact people's fat loss? And in particular, I know a lot of I always like to bring this up because we could really get stressed out over getting healthy. I actually have a client right now who has phobia over her health issues.
Orthorexia.
Yeah, and this is a legit thing. So she literally approaches her lifestyle and health with a level of anxiety and stress. So how does that impact fat?
Absolutely. And the mechanism there, again, so when we think about some of the medications that are being used right now for weight loss and obesity and type 2 diabetes, these GLP-1s seem to have 3 different mechanisms that they're acting on: how quickly food moves out of your stomach, insulin production, and the hypothalamus, or the part of the brain that is related to satiety and desire and all of that. So that hypothalamus, where the leptin story exists, and is a major contributor to the activity of the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is your resting, digesting nerve. It's the largest nerve complex in your body. And therefore, if the vagus nerve is active, it means you're more in a resting, digesting state. Then you're going to release, your pancreas is going to be much more sensitive and release insulin in more appropriate amounts. Your production of the GLP-1s and the other hormones associated with energy balance and management are going to be efficient. If you're watching things on television that make you angry while you're eating dinner, and you're stressed out about the day while you're eating dinner, and your vagus nerve is kind of shut down because of that activity, because you're not in resting, digesting, you're more in protection and defense, well, then the efficiency of all that stuff is going to be compromised. And the signals on storing energy, using energy are going to be mixed.
And would sleep have an impact? Would that also impact your sleep? And does sleep impact fat metabolism?
Yeah, because first of all, one night of poor sleep, let's just say you're used to getting 7 hours of sleep, and then you have a night where you only get 3 hours. That day, your insulin resistance, that morning, your cortisol is going to be about 40% higher for the rest of the day. Your cortisol, again, a stress hormone or a blood sugar hormone, its baseline is going to be 40% higher. So you go through your day, experience life stresses, and it's 40% higher.
At night sleep, 40% higher.
Yeah, just like that. Which, again, cortisol is a hormone that kind of functions the opposite of insulin. So your insulin resistance is going to be higher, and your cortisol production is going to be higher just on getting one bad night's sleep.
Wow. So someone who has chronic issues with sleep,
correct,
added in some stress, life stress, family stress, business stress, that's going to absolutely impact their ability to metabolize fat.
Absolutely. To metabolize fat, to metabolize, to shift that energy storage, that energy, again, it's not gasoline that we're storing, it's energy in the form of carbon bonds. Right. Where do we put those carbon bonds? That is a hormonal story. Messing with your sleep is going to mess with your stress hormones, your blood sugar hormones. It's going to skew that whole message.
So when we work with clients, that's one of the big things that people don't realize is it's really a hidden piece of this puzzle that most come to us stressed out because of their issues and their health problems, and they want us to help them fix them, and really don't acknowledge the impact stress has. Start doing some breath work, some managing the other autonomic nervous system, and their sleep gets better, their metabolism gets better, their digestion gets better. So everything is better when your nervous system is regulated. It's probably the least thought about of the 5 pillars that we talk about. That's why I always just bring it back up, because it's the one that no one wants to. It's natural not to address it, because it's natural that we. Our stress reaction is to pretend that's not even happening,
right?
Because we want to. That's kind of so we have to bring it to light and acknowledge it, because it's usually the underlying factor affecting everything else. So we've covered a lot today on fat.
The advice that I would give to the listener is don't try to do a deep dive into the science of what we're talking about unless you genuinely enjoy it,
right?
Like I do. Like we do. We love talking about it. We love looking into it. But to sit there and perseverate over, all, and again, we only talked about a handful of hormones. There's a whole bunch of hormones, and you can get lost in this stuff. Live your life, I like to say, in an ancestral way. We didn't even talk about light, how the sun actually plays a role here in leptin, in everything, how not getting exposed, not getting your eyes on the sun, or your face in the daylight and your feet in the grass on a daily basis, that is going to skew all of this as well. We didn't even talk about how people live their life in an office or in a home environment.
I think that's a great show.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great. I think we should do that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as far as grounding and getting outside.
The 24-hour cycles of the sun and how that dictates our sleep. How
temperature, that our body is, we're animals, and we often overlook the basics, but every animal has a wake-sleep cycle. Yeah. Right? We're dealing with melatonin and sun. And
there's not an animal on this planet that doesn't sleep.
Right. And it could be, you could be nocturnal, but so you're just sleeping the opposite time of the day,
Matt Walker said it best. He goes, I think he said the survival advantage that would exist if there was an animal that didn't have to sleep, right? Because you're vulnerable when you're sleeping. Right? You're out in the jungle, you're sleeping, you get attacked and killed.
And you know what is? Many have tried.
It's never adapted, right?
Or many have, not that they've tried, many just don't sleep, and they're up all night, and it's a badge of honor.
Sleep deprivation is torture.
Yeah.
Right? And we already know how many days can a person go with zero sleep?
Like a week?
Whatever.
Yeah,
it's very crazy, short period of time, and you die.
Yeah.
You just die.
Right.
So to minimize the importance of your quality of sleep is
right. And to minimize the importance of these general biological systems in our body that we want to acknowledge and tap into to increase our lifestyle. And I think it's going to be a great show going forward. But I think we talked a lot. I think if anybody watched this whole show, they learned a lot about fat metabolism today. I certainly did.
Yeah.
And so, think about it. We always end up with, like, why would anyone listen to us? I'll tell you off the bat, I'll just answer my own question. I just listen to what you have to say. I learn something every single week as a doctor, as someone who lives this. I'm the applier, right? I'm the one that's going to apply all these things. I'll do the diet, I'll do the workouts, and I'll try to get the results. I like to be the scientific result of the work, right?
Yeah.
And I hope people are trying or have that same spirit to want to try some of these things. And if they find that they're having a hard time, that they would ask, right? So tell us, what are some ways that they reach out to us, to connect with us, to get some of this stuff rolling in people's lives?
Comment and ask questions right here on the YouTube page. We want to engage with you guys. We're on all the social media platforms and all of that. So we do like to understand what your questions are, what your challenges are, because we're talking about things we're interested in, but we want this ultimately to help people, right? So go ahead and engage with us in the comments, and we'll certainly adapt our content to suit that. At the same time, pay attention to what we're putting out there, because we're going to be creating environments where people can go and learn more and do deeper dives and maybe even get some kind of consulting, where they don't have to necessarily have the expense of working with us one-on-one.
Right. We do take on clients. It's quite expensive. You can reach out to us for that. But as far as getting the benefit of what we do with those clients, we're going to have some things that everybody can engage with.
Absolutely.
And they can engage with us as well, live in some community environment.
And, you and I both believe that we individually and our patients and our clients are not an accumulation of information gathered from 10,000 people who did a carbohydrate restrictive diet for 12 weeks and measure. It's so difficult to take all the variables we discussed in this show: light, sleep, diet, macronutrients, physical activity, age, genetics, all these different things. There is no study to tell you what to do and how to live. It just doesn't exist. Yes, it's smart to do studies on 10,000 people to find out what happens if they affect this one variable, and then try to figure out, well, why did we observe that? And that's great for scientists to do, and they'll spend billions of dollars doing it, and we can learn from that, and we do. But at the same time, when we're talking about lifestyle, exercise, diet, macronutrient profile, sleep, these are all things that you can do.
Very simple metrics.
And just pay attention to what you'd like to see improve in you. And if the intervention you do is not an intervention you enjoy, or you're not benefiting from it, well, then move away from it. And do something else. Because you can, and it's safe, and it's easy. We're not
and having metrics is key. So the way that we operate very specifically in the different pillars in which we help people, whether it be through cardiovascular, through metabolic health, whether it be through autonomic dysregulation or body composition.
We're not your doctor. We're not your doctor. We're talking about lifestyle change. We're teaching you how to pay attention to yourself and how to increase the probability of you having a desired experience. But, if you have a question about how, you should dose your medication or what medication, that's a conversation for you and your doctor. So this show.
But if you want to dial in your cardiovascular using zone 2 cardio and VO2 max, or if you want to dial in your metabolic issues using very specific blood work, or so the way what we do approach is these 5 pillars with very specific metrics, because because that becomes the foundation to change someone's life. And if you don't have those metrics and ability to measure those very important pillars, so that's why it makes sense. Everyone's going to be different, but they have the same pillars, right? We have the same approach, but they'll have different results. And that's where the clinical experience comes in, and that's why we're able to get such great results with our clients. And that's why we believe that we can scale this in a way where we can help others, where you don't have to be a client, but you can actually get the same access to that information. And that's our hope and our desire with this work. So I enjoy doing that with you, by the way.
Absolutely.
So that's it for this week. Great stuff on fat, and appreciate you.